Next week, you're speaking at WMU about your book, The Anxious Generation. What would you
Mhm.
like to gain from next week's event?
Let me think who I'm meeting with. I think I'm just giving the talk. I'm not really having any meetings with people, am I?
No, you're just giving the talk to students over Zoom, I believe.
Yeah. And tell me, I've forgotten what the arrangements are. Tell me, is the audience, is it like university wide? Is it mostly students? Is it faculty?
It's mostly students. I think it's open to the entire university, though.
Okay. Um, all right. So I'm going to want to communicate both to students and to faculty and administrators. My book, The Anxious Generation, was really written for adults. It was written for parents and teachers and legislators because my book shows that we have to act very quickly to change the conditions of childhood. And so in the book, I didn't write it for Gen Z. I didn't write the book for young people. But young people are reading it and recognizing what's happening to them. And many are joining groups or joining efforts to make things safer. Um, so I want to convey to both audiences the magnitude of what has happened and how it goes way beyond mental illness. I focused on mental illness in the book, but I now see that the damage to attention, the damage to the ability to focus or read a book is possibly larger than the damage to mental health.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to try to convey all of that, and then I will show that despite the enormity of these problems, the way we get out is actually pretty simple. These four norms to roll back the phone-based childhood.
So, yeah, in your book, you talked about those four new norms to be implemented for a screen-free, healthier childhood. What
Hmm.
can students who have already grown up on the internet do to help combat mental health issues?
Hmm. So, um, the so to start with two points or recognize 2 points. One, um, your brain is still changing rapidly in puberty all the way until your early or mid 20s. And so if you're a college student, you still have a couple of years before your brain is becomes less malleable. And what I've found in my own courses at NYU is that students who take back control of their attention get nearly miraculous results. Um, I teach a course called Flourishing at NYU Stern. It's 35 students, mostly sophomores, and um, they have a semester to change something about themselves. Um, for some people, they're not sleeping enough, so they focus on that. But the most common need is to regain attention and greatly reduce social media use and phone time. In each class, there are always a few students who are spending 4 hours or more a day on social media. Um, and for those students, social media has largely taken all available bits of their attention. They don't really have any attention left over to do anything. And when those students commit to moving social media apps off of their phone, and then sometimes deleting them entirely from their computer as well and not using them, they get miraculous results where they get benefits far beyond where they expected. They find that they have plenty of time to do their homework. They find that they can go out with friends more often. Um, they find they're in a happier mood. And so all of this transforms their life from an anxious, overburdened college student who struggles to do her homework to a happy young person who suddenly discovers, hey, life is full of opportunities.
Absolutely. I love that. You're an advocate for phone-free schools as well. In
Hmm.
the era of technology and the internet, what are your thoughts on ideas that students should be taught to utilize technology for education rather than viewing smartphone as the enemy?
Hmm. Well, I think that we were sold a bill of goods by the ed tech companies who promised us that giving kids Chromebooks and iPads would improve their education. But in fact, educational statistics in America and around the world tanked after 2012. As soon as we put computers on kids' desks, they began to pay less attention to the teacher. They began to get more dopamine system stimulation during the day. And when you give kids lots of hits of quick, easy dopamine by gamifying everything, what you're doing is you're making the rest of the day more boring, more difficult to pay attention. So I'm of the view right now that actually screens on desks are the enemy. And given that there's no real evidence that these things have helped, and it's looking increasingly like they've done major damage to education around the world. So I think that they are the enemy, and we should treat them as such unless there's good evidence that specific applications are beneficial. So Khan Academy, for example, is wonderful. I have no criticism of Khan Academy, but if it is delivered to students on an iPad or a Chromebook on which they can do anything else, anything in addition to Khan Academy, then they will do many things. So this is all part of the shattering of human attention. What we have done to education has shattered human attention. And well, you tell me, do you hear about friends? Do you have any friends who say they can't watch a movie? They can't just like sit through a 100-minute movie
Oh,
without.
absolutely. I think TikTok is a big part of that too, with the short form
Exactly. Yep.
content.
You got it. That's right. TikTok has probably done more to destroy human potential than any other program than anything
Absolutely.
else in history. It's hard to compare it to unleaded gas. Unleaded gas caused a lot of brain damage. So I can't quite say which is bigger, but I would put TikTok up in a league with unleaded gas.
Mm, for sure. Many people
I'm sorry,
believe,
wait, not lead, I'm sorry, not unleaded, leaded gas, leaded gasoline.
gotcha. Many people believe that the dramatic shift in mental health issues amongst adolescents is largely due to a change in schooling, specifically with the No Child Left Behind Act placing emphasis on testing and pressure to achieve rather than holistic knowledge. What are your thoughts on this?
That makes no sense at all. Why would that cause girls in Australia and Scandinavia and Canada and Britain to start cutting themselves in 2012? Why were they following educational trends in the United States and freaking out about them? It doesn't make any sense.
Mhm. Um,
Also, why would that make people cut themselves and kill themselves?
that's a great question.
So yeah, the fact that this happens at the same time in so many countries means that any United States specific explanation fails.
Mhm. Absolutely. You discussed not allowing social media before age 16. Many social media sites already have age limitations that children can easily bypass. How do you recommend this rule be enforced?
So the US Congress created this terrible problem in the 1990s by by passing laws that say to the tech companies, you can do whatever you want to children, um, as long as they're old enough to lie and tell you that they're 13. You can do whatever you want, show them whatever you want, and nobody can sue you. If a
Hmm.
kid commits suicide, the parents cannot sue you. So that's where we are. Um, now, um, the early internet was not so toxic. And the millennials grew up on the early internet and they came out fine. But after 2009, 2010, things get much more viral, much more addictive. The monetization of attention skyrockets. And this is the birth of Gen Z. Gen Z is the first generation to be victims of this new business model during puberty. And so I think it is unconscionable that there are effectively no age limits anywhere on the internet. Any 10-year-old can go on Pornhub. Any 10-year-old can open 50 accounts on TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram. And many 10-year-olds are doing just that, especially for TikTok. So I think it is absolutely unconscionable that we've allowed this to go on and on and on as as attention shatters, depression rises, and suicide rises.
Hmm.
Uh, so in the real world, we have age limits on actions that involve graphic sexuality, extreme violence, addiction, and physical harm.
Hmm.
And when children go on social media, many of them will face all four of those. So again, it is completely unconscionable that we do not have age gating on the internet. And I thank God for Australia, which is the first country to stand up and say, we're gonna require the platforms to figure this out.
Absolutely. How do you best support the parent who agrees with your four new norms, but is in a social circle where everyone has given their children internet access and their child is the odd man out?
Yeah. So that was a very common situation until this past year. But so many parents are now reading The Anxious Generation, and it's being talked about on almost every parenting group. So everyone is now familiar with the ideas. And what this means is that no family is going to be the only one that is thinking about this. So it is hard because most families are giving their kids smartphones and social media. It is hard because I just learned 2 weeks ago, 40% of 2-year-olds have their own iPad.
That's
Uh,
wild.
it's
Unbelievable.
unbelievable. But again, the destruction of human attention is happening at a scale beyond comprehension. Um, so the way that I'm trying to support them is by calling for collective action and calling for parents to link up and sync up because most parents are concerned about this. This is, in fact, social media is actually the number one fear of parents, way ahead of drugs, pregnancy, automobile accidents. Social media is the number one fear of parents in this country and around and well, I don't know about around the world, let's just say in this country. And so what we have is called either a collective action problem or a common knowledge problem. It's one thing if you're afraid of what this is going to do to your kid, but you don't know that everyone else is also afraid and that they know that you're afraid. Once you reach a state in which I'm concerned about something, I know that you're concerned about something, and I know that you know that I'm concerned about something. Once you reach that state, then group action can proceed very rapidly. And that's where we are now. We were not there a year ago, but now that's where we are. And that's why all over the country and all over the world, legislatures are now introducing bills to make schools phone free and to raise the age to 16. Everyone is upset. Everyone sees the problem. And now that it's become common knowledge, the world is acting.
What do you think is different about this year that really caused everybody to take action and change?
Well, I think what happened was my book took the world from a state where most people were concerned about this, but didn't know that everyone else was concerned and didn't know what to do about it. And so I think my book offered a common diagnosis and a relatively simple set of solutions. And so the book seems to have been the missing ingredient. Parents were already ready to act, but they didn't know what to do. So, um, I think a book that is based on science, but also offers direct advice coming at exactly the right time. In a sense, I caught the wave perfectly. I was very lucky in the timing of my book. And so I think that's why things are changing so fast now.
Absolutely. How realistic do you think it is that our society can get back to a world that is not centered around the internet?
Oh, around the internet, no, the internet is here to stay, and the internet overall is amazing and wonderful. No, very few people want to get rid of the internet. So if we're talking about adults, then that's not going to happen, and I wouldn't want that to happen. But if we're talking about children, I think it has to happen, and I want it to happen. I can imagine an internet that was safe for children, but we don't have that. We have an internet in which giant companies can do whatever the hell they want to your children and face no liability. That's the internet that we now have. And so I think we have to change childhood back to a play-based form, and we have to roll back the phone-based or internet-based childhood because it is destroying children at unprecedented levels.
Mhm. Can you talk about the idea that mental health is not worse than ever before, but as a society, we are just no longer ignoring mental health issues?
Oh, that also, I hear that one a lot, but that also doesn't make sense. So think about it. Um, there used to be a big stigma on mental health when I was a kid in the 70s. It would be very embarrassing to say that you suffered from depression or anxiety or bipolar disorder. And every decade since the 70s, the stigma has reduced, and people have been more willing to talk about it. So, why would it be the case that the levels of self-report of mental illness would be steady, unchanging from the 90s until 2011? And then why would it be the case that all of a sudden around the world it goes up? Was there a sudden coordinated destigmatization that happened in 2012? I would argue no. I would argue that's when girls, especially because it's especially girls where you see the hockey stick shape curves. It's with boys you don't see an exact elbow at 2012. Boys, the curve is more gradual, but girls, as soon as they get on Instagram, that is, 2012 is the year when girls migrate onto Instagram in large numbers because that's the year that Facebook buys Instagram and it becomes very popular. And that's exactly when rates of anxiety, depression, and self-harm spike for girls. So I don't see any evidence that destigmatization is related in any way to the curves that we see. If it was destigmatization, we'd either see steadily rising rates because people are reporting it more and more every decade, or we'd see steadily falling rates because now that we're destigmatizing it, people would be less mentally ill. So no, I've looked and looked and looked. There's no connection I can find um, between rates of mental illness and any economic variable or any variable related to destigmatization. And once again, I would ask, whatever destigmatization was happening in America, was it happening at exactly the same time in Scandinavia and Europe and Australia and New Zealand? How did that happen?
Yeah, absolutely. Can you talk about how social media disproportionately impacts girls' mental health versus boys?
Hmm. Yeah. Um, so a few companies now own our children's childhood and have monetized it. They've taken every bit of attention. And for boys, that's especially video games and pornography. Um, but if you want to extract attention from girls, you want to set a trap for them.
Hmm.
And the way a trap works is you have to have bait that is appealing to the animal. And then when the animal grabs the bait, something changes and they can't escape. That's what a trap is. And so if you want to trap preteen girls or teenage girls of any age, what's the bait? Well, the bait is social information. Girls have a much greater interest in the map of social relationships, in who is friends with who is fighting with whom, who said what about whom. Girls are more socially oriented. Boys are a little bit more on the spectrum, literally. I mean, that is one of the major brain differences is that boys are slightly shifted over on the autism spectrum. Actually, please don't print that. That'll just be controversial. So actually, please cut that out. Um, but just you can just say that girls have a greater interest in the social map and social relationships. And so once Instagram mastered the art of saying, do you want to see what someone posted about you? Do you want to see what so and so said about so and so? And so girls get drawn in, and then once they're all on, then nobody can leave because if you leave, you're alone because everyone's on Instagram
Hmm.
or Tumblr. There are a couple of other platforms, but everyone's on just a few platforms. And then once they're on, many things happen. One is that the platforms are designed to take every available moment. So that's usually 3 or 4 hours a day. Actually, I'm sorry, it's now 5 hours a day. No, it's more than that, actually. Girls are spending 5.5 hours a day on social media. Boys are spending 4.5. So 5.5 hours a day is pretty much all your time. There really isn't, nobody could give up 5.5 hours from their day and still do anything else other than the minimum of what you have to do. So when you have to service hundreds of relationships on social media platforms, you don't really have time for anyone else. And one of the saddest things is to see girls together in the real world, each just standing near each other, but on their own phone. Sometimes they'll both be looking at the same phone, so that's a little bit more social. But for the most part, it seems that they're just standing near each other, looking down at their phones. So Social media does not connect people, it separates them, especially girls. Social media exposes them to men who want sex or money from them. Social media puts them into direct competition with each other over looks. Social media makes them extraordinarily conscious about their appearance. I did not let my daughter have Instagram in sixth grade. And when she got into seventh grade, she said, Dad, I can see that the Instagram girls are stupid. She could see how these girls who came with her from elementary school into middle school, once they got on Instagram, they became stupid, shallow, focused on hair and makeup and posing in a pornographic way for selfies. So it's degrading, and it's cruel. It just takes all the worst parts of being a middle school girl and just cranks them all up.
Yeah. Do you think that maybe the narrative that girls are at fault for becoming shallow or posing for the interests of men, do you think there's harm in that narrative rather than teaching men to not be predatory towards girls?
I've never heard that narrative. What do you say? Who's blaming the girls? I don't understand.
Um, just people in society, like kind of more like a victim blaming
I've never
stance.
heard that. I've never heard anyone blaming middle school girls for being sucked into social media and beauty culture. No, I mean that's obviously the industry's fault.
Absolutely, absolutely. Why would you, or what would you say to students to encourage them to come to your event next week?
Um, I would say that um, um, if you believe that social media is making your life full and complete and successful, then you might want to come to hear another side. However, since there are almost no students who believe that, I would suggest to students who think that they are not living their fullest life, they should come because I'm going to lay out what has happened to Gen Z, what it's doing to your brains, and how it is damaging your future prospects for happiness, employment, and marriage.
Absolutely. Is there anything else you want students to know before the event next week?
I think that's probably a pretty good, that's probably enough.
All right. Well, thank you so much for meeting with me today. I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to your event next week.
Well, very good. Thank you, Madeline.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.